The Soweto electricity crisis has spilled over into the streets since yesterday morning when dozens of frustrated residents barricaded the Soweto Highway. Residents of Diepkloof Zone 3 said that they've been without power for 2 weeks now. At the same time, a joint statement from Eskom and the newly elected City of Johannesburg Mayor, Dr. Mpho Phalatse, said the outage was due to illegal connections, among other issues. The Mayor joins us now for more on the story, and in the midst of this interview, as we kick off our discussion with you, Madam Mayor, that protest action in Soweto is in fact continuing this morning. You know, it's obviously a legacy issue that you have inherited now. At the face of it, at the start of the issue, how do you propose that we resolve this ongoing crisis of electricity in that area?
Well, a good step is to first understand what the issue is. And I spent time with Eskom yesterday, although I've been engaging them over the past 2 weeks telephonically. We had a good 3 hours yesterday to look at exactly what the issue is, particularly in this Diepkloof area. There are 3 things that are happening in this area. One, Eskom is losing revenue in the area because of illegal acts, such as connecting illegally to the grid, bypassing meters, but also buying from ghost vendors. Now, in the past 8 months alone, Eskom has lost 96 million rands in revenue. And this is following many engagements with the same community who were initially on postpaid, asked to be on prepaid so that they could have better control of the expenditure of the use of electricity. That wish was granted. They're now on prepaid, but they're still not buying because of these criminal acts. Eskom has reached a stage now where they can no longer afford to continue providing electricity to this community without receiving any revenue from the same community. The non-payment rate is in excess of 80%. So the only solution for Eskom was to then disconnect the area, issue the residents who have been found to be guilty of these contraventions, or more than 700 buyers, or non-buyers rather, who've been found to be guilty of these contraventions, have been issued with fines of 6,000 rands each. And Eskom has said to them, if even 50% of them pay, then they will at least afford to reconnect the area. So the issue here is that payment needs to be made by those residents, and Eskom can then reconnect the area. Of course, we're also looking at long-term solutions, which I've always promised, even throughout the campaign trail, that we will look at opening up the market. I mean, currently, Eskom is monopolizing the electricity supply space. The City of Johannesburg is dealing with only Eskom and Calvin as we speak. And you know, with that, you can always have, with monopoly, you will not have competitive pricing as well. So yes, we also want to lower the cost of electricity, but currently that is what it costs while we're working on longer term solutions. And if people want Eskom to give them electricity now, they will need to pay those fines so Eskom can reconnect them. In the meantime, I've started engaging with independent power producers, and we will be starting to roll out pilot projects in different parts of the city to look at renewable sources of energy as an alternative and to look at possibly lowering the cost of providing electricity. However, Eskom did point out that there is some form of resistance from residents to a different form of energy. So we're going to need to do a lot of change management in the process.
I suppose part of the frustration from residents, many of them who are taking to the street, and I'm sure this has been part of your discussions as well, Madam Mayor, is around the issue of people who are making payments, who are trying to sort out their bills with Eskom, but they are also impacted by this kind of, you know, wide-scale power outages. 2 weeks now.
Definitely, that is a concern for me as well, and it's a concern I've raised with Eskom over and over again, but I've come to also understand that with the 8 transformers in this area, these paying residents are spread across all 8 transformers, and they form a very small proportion of the numbers supplied by these transformers. And so the cost of connecting them cannot be justified considering how many more people aren't paying. So it has to do with the technology and the way that Eskom supplies electricity. Unfortunately, it becomes very difficult to only connect the few. I did ask Eskom to consider it as an option. However, they did indicate that it's not possible in the Diepkloof area.
It's the inconvenience of paying your electricity bill, but being saddled with the burden of having power cuts due to the non-payment of others. So it's the inconvenience on the one hand. On the other hand, there are people whose lives depend on them having an electricity connection. Is it fair? I mean, Eskom obviously talks about its bottom line and it needs to recoup that money. But is it fair, in the face of a pandemic in particular, to make this kind of widespread decision? There are people who depend on refrigeration for their medication, who depend on oxygen that needs to be hooked up to electricity. Especially at this time of the pandemic, is this a fair decision to be made despite the outstanding money?
I don't think the issue here is fairness. Is it affordable? Because remember, it costs money to supply electricity. Eskom needs money to supply electricity. Eskom does not have the money to supply electricity in areas that are not paying for it. And so that's the issue here. It's not a question of fairness, and it is unfair on the few that are paying, but it's not Eskom's fault that the bulk of the people are not paying. And these are people who can afford to pay. Remember,
I suppose, Madam Mayor, the word that I wanted to use is it humanitarian? Is it a humanitarian response from Eskom, who routinely asks for the understanding of South Africans insofar as load shedding is concerned, to make this kind of decision in Diepkloof?
Again, it goes back to affordability. It's not sustainable to continue supplying electricity and not getting revenue back. It's not about a humanitarian issue. Yes, Eskom may want to give electricity free of charge to all residents of South Africa, but it's simply not sustainable. That business model does not work. And that's why we're here now, where Eskom is having to exercise very strict measures to ensure that they recoup the money. These are criminal acts. These are people who are connecting illegally to the grid, people who are bypassing meters, people who are buying from ghost vendors when they know that it's illegal to do so. That money is not going back to Eskom. And so we're in effect asking Eskom to operate free of charge. Where is the money supposed to come from? I think if we can answer that question, then Eskom will be able to help us. If we can say to Eskom, this is where you're supposed to get the money from to supply free electricity to the whole of South Africa. It's not possible. We don't have that kind of money. The South African ratepayer and taxpayer cannot afford for Eskom to give free electricity. Remember, Eskom receives money from Treasury, from equitable share. There's so many other needs across society. We're building clinics. We're building schools. There's so many other things that need to be done with the same money. If we're saying that people should not pay for electricity, are we then willing to accept that there are other services that we're not going to get as a result? We need to think holistically here. People who can't afford to pay for electricity must register for ESP, the expanded social package, so they can receive free basic electricity. That is a provision that's always been in place. But we're seeing that there's a very low uptake there as well, and we are investigating why that is. But Eskom has indicated that for you to access those benefits, you need to be buying, and that because of these criminal acts, many don't want to buy, and that's why some who even afford or who may want to register on ESP or who may be eligible for those benefits do not want to register because it means they have to buy. They cannot bypass meters, etc. So there is a culture of criminality which we need to deal with, and we cannot keep on sugarcoating it. It is wrong. It is a crime to steal electricity. And I understand we're concerned about the small proportion. I'm concerned about them too. But how else then do we propose to resolve this? Because reconnecting the entire area means we in fact promoting this culture of stealing electricity from Eskom.
So the 6,000 rand that needs to be paid, 6,052 rand for the reconnection of electricity, those are 700 customers who I understand need to make that 6,000 rand payment. It's a difficult time of the year. Is that 6,000 rand that needs to be paid in one go?
So Eskom has in the past made arrangements for the money to be paid in installments. And again, the very same residents did not honor those arrangements. I mean, they were given options to pay even up to 6 months without Eskom disconnecting, and they did not honor that. And so, Eskom has no choice now but to use this approach. It's not as though they've not explored other alternatives. They really have, and they're at their wits' end, because how are they supposed to stay open, without generating the revenue that they're meant to be?
I want to ask you a question as well around the city itself. I mean, is there a plan in time that the city will be taking over the grid as City Power?
So that process is still underway. I saw the statement by the ANC. It's completely false that we're not interested in taking over Eskom supply areas. We've said consistently that we will look into that. In fact, where the DA governs, we see it happening already, where we opened up for greater participation by independent power producers because we want to stimulate competition in the energy provision space. We want to lower the cost of supplying electricity, and we want to offset load shedding. So I have already started engaging independent power producers, and we will be rolling out pilot projects in different parts of the city to see the viability of the different types of energy for household use. That plan is still in place. However, it's not a plan that's going to switch on the lights in Diepkloof tomorrow. And that's what I've been trying to explain to residents of Diepkloof, that as much as the city is rolling out its own plan, it's not going to resolve their issues immediately, because the immediate issue needs money. The people who owe Eskom money must pay so that Eskom can reconnect them and can afford to actually keep on maintaining those feeders that they need to have electricity.
So in the meantime, those protests they continue in Diepkloof Zone 3 from yesterday. They're continuing today as well. You say you've spent quite a lot of time with Eskom over the phone, and yesterday a good couple of hours as well with the power utility. Have you been to visit Diepkloof Zone 3 as well, Madam Mayor?
I've been all over Soweto with the electricity crisis. Remember, this is nothing new, but I have been engaging a lot of residents. I've not engaged them in Diepkloof yet. We will engage together with Eskom, and we've got a strategy on how we're going to do that. We're not going to engage for the purpose of entertaining people. We're going to engage for the purpose of resolving this issue, and we do have a plan to do so. I will be doing it with Eskom, and we will engage meaningfully with a view to finally end this once and for all.
Dr. Mpho Phalatse, let me thank you for your time this morning. She's the newly elected Johannesburg mayor, and of course it's in the wake of the ongoing electricity crisis in Soweto, particularly in Diepkloof Zone 3, where that protest action continues today.